Started for me, in actuality, was my 10th birthday. My dad gave me a disc recording machine for my 10th birthday. And what it was a big black box like this with a microphone you plug in and you record records, discs, on blank discs. Well, after 10 minutes with that machine, I knew, and I was only 10 years old, spent 10 minutes with that machine, I knew exactly what I wanted to do the rest of my life. When I was a kid growing up in Minneapolis, I was really fortunate in that my mom and dad were very supportive of what I wanted to do because I made a mess out of the house. I'd be drilling holes through the wall to put speakers through, tore plaster down from the ceiling, hanging speakers, almost set the house on fire, overloading the electrical circuits with my recording equipment. And it got to the point, I guess when I was about 17 or 18, that I built an illegal radio station in the garage at home so I could broadcast my recordings to the whole neighborhood. And Mom and Dad just went along with everything, never a whimper. My early days were spent in Minneapolis recording choirs and classical music mainly. There's some wonderful choirs and musicians in that area. Then in 1957, I moved to Chicago and worked for RCA Victor and recording the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, at the time under the direction of Fritz Reiner. And it was a wonderful learning experience for me because Dr. Reiner truly loved the recording process. He really was into recordings. We would sit and edit the Chicago Orchestra tapes bar by bar, sometimes note by note, until it was as perfect as we could possibly make it. And one of the things I think that helped me the most was Dr. Reiner made me part of his incredible new incentive program, which was one mistake and you're through. In the late 50s, in the early days of my career in Chicago in the business, was a wonderfully exciting time to be in the business. The bands that I worked with, all the major artists, Count Basie, Duke Ellington, Stan Kenton, Woody Herman, on and on and on. All these musicians were enthralled and really interested in the recording process. Although at that point, the goal of recording was to pretty much present an unaltered acoustical event, but that was beginning to change. So by the 60s, late 60s, early 70s, we began to get away from reality and sound, and our imagination became a part of the recording process. And it's what I call the recording revolution, where we went away from an unaltered acoustic event to something that can only exist in our imagination. And that's when I really got excited about what I was doing. One of the early recordings that I think of that marked a real change was Les Paul and Mary Ford's How High the Moon, which was a total departure from reality in recorded music. And I think that what happened at that point in time, popular music took a left turn away from reality in sound, and we've never looked back. A large portion of the record-buying public decided that reality in recording was not necessary, perhaps not even desirable. And I think when I came along in the late 50s and that revolution was still very much in evidence, I think that's what really excited me and got me into this thing in a very big way, in that my imagination and my creativity could be a part of what we were doing, and that these sound fields that I was recording by the 1970s and 80s would be have a big part of me in them, of my imagination in them. And to this day, that really makes me excited. I love it. One thing that I think is important for anybody is, in music recording, is to get out and hear live music in a good acoustical situation. I'll never forget when I did my first master class at UCLA. I picked 10 students. I had a lot of applications, but picked 10 students. So we had our first meeting at UCLA, and I said, okay, gang, what we're going to do today is we're going to go hear the Los Angeles Philharmonic. You should have heard the belly aching. It was ridiculous. No, we don't want to hear that old stuff. What do we have to do that for? I said, just listen. So we all went. I got seats for us right in the middle, a few rows back. And when we got back to UCLA after the concert, everybody was so fired up. Did you hear the presence on the violin solo? Did you hear the depth of the sound? And the left and the right, they were excited. Their eyes were as big as saucers. And it's amazing. And from that point on, they had this mental reference of what music truly sounds like. Without a benchmark of live acoustical music in your mind's ear, you have no grounding, so to speak, for your own sonic personality. And I think it's very, very important for that to be developed. You cannot learn your craft, or you cannot develop your own personality by only listening to other people's recordings. By hearing live music in a good acoustical situation, it gives your ear a benchmark, a starting point, so to speak. All music is created to have some acoustical support. And the way sounds are perceived by us, the way music is perceived, is very dependent on how our life experiences develop. So get out and listen to live music, not just classical music, though that's a good starting point, but rock and roll in a good room, and any kind of live music, and then use that experience to develop your own ear. One thing that is lacking in a lot of modern recording is the presence of truly stereophonic images. And by stereophonic images, I don't mean what I call two-channel mono, where you hear something coming out of the left speaker and something different coming out of the right speaker, and that is automatically called stereo. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. Stereophonic, if you were to define that word, means solid sound. And it's the ability to recreate a sound source, to be able to tell intensity differences between left and right. To be able to record a stereo image and hear it sounding natural is very, very important and very lacking in a lot of modern recording. Not to say that all the sources have to be stereo, but it's important to have some stereophonic reality in a recording for it to be emotional. To me, there are 3 dimensions to sound: left, right, and space, front to back. So stereo is not just a 2-dimensional sound, it's very 3-dimensional. at least to my mind's ear. I guess at this point we should talk a little bit about microphone technique, and this is a subject very dear to my heart. I love microphones, and I own 105 microphones. They're in 15 anvil cases, and they travel with me to every project that I do. The reason I have all these microphones is, first of all, microphones to me are like the magic wand of what I do. They're the voodoo. And every microphone has its own character, its own quality, and they are like different instruments to me, or let's say maybe a different color in my palette. One microphone, for instance, a condenser mic, will sound a certain way on one type of voice or an instrument, and if you put another mic, like a ribbon mic or a dynamic mic, it will make that instrument sound another way. So I use these as different colors in the palette. This is one of my favorite cases. This case has two U47s, Neumanns, which is the large capsule cardioid only. This is a U47 FET, great vocal mic, and there's a matched pair. Superb microphone. Incidentally, can you zero in on the Neumann logo? Okay, here's a little inside dope on the Neumann logo. If you see the logo that's in purple like this, it means it's a field effect transistor or solid state microphone. The tube microphones, the logo is black. The red microphones, where the logo is red, I forget what that means, but there's three distinct colors of Neumann logo. And the purple is field effect transistor. This is a superb mic. And here's a AKG 414 EB. I have two that are consecutive serial numbers. And this microphone I frequently use in bidirectional as an XY pair like this. This is a wonderful mic for piano recording. I love this in a grand piano. Again, XY, if you aimed it at the keys, or the strings rather, and then do it in this coincident pair. Microphone technique is a huge subject. It can take forever. As a matter of fact, it will be a whole tape in this series. But just to touch a few of the high points, for instance, I love a large capsule condenser mic in the piano for a piano recording. There's a perfect example of where a condenser mic works well. Another technique that I've used often is to use a small capsule condenser mic in a string bass or an upright bass. For instance, I wrap the microphone with foam rubber, stick it in the bridge of the bass so that the capsule ends up almost under the fingerboard of the bass. The resultant sound is just incredible. You need an omnidirectional condenser mic to do this, but this is a little trick that is just fantastic. This is a very unusual microphone. It's an Altec Lansing 21B condenser mic, omni capsule. It's one of the only American-made condenser mics that achieved any real popularity. This microphone was used in film quite a bit as a narrator or announcers or an interview mic where the guy would talk and then he'd interview somebody and they'd speak and so on. As a matter of fact, if you, a little bit of history here, an affair to remember. There's a whole segment with Robert Q. Lewis with an Altec 21B microphone. Check it out sometime. This type of microphone. Okay, here we go. You take the mic and the packing material and wrap it around the base of the microphone like this. And then you put it in the bridge of the bass, like this. It goes in the bridge of the bass, and you slip it up there so that the capsule of the microphone is directly behind the fingerboard of the bass. Okay. Now, Arturo will play a few little licks and check out this bass sound. Let's do a stereo acoustic guitar recording. Here's B&K Brüel & Kjær 4006 and its matched partner. These mics were made for me in Copenhagen and matched there. We'll set them up in a coincident pair setup, like so. And like this. And Jose Luis, if you'll sit. Whoops. And we'll set up the mics close together. Capsules right angle almost. And let's listen to a little bit of Jose Luis playing. This is in stereo configuration. Now we'll do a mono recording just to show you the difference. I will take one microphone away and we'll actually unplug it. Okay, approximately the same music again. This is mono. I'm going to plug in the other mic. As Jose Luis is playing, we'll bring in the stereo sound. And here it is in stereo. A perfect example of using, let's say, a ribbon microphone, which is one of my favorite types of microphones, is Michael Jackson's Don't Stop Till You Get Enough. The bottle percussion that's a huge part of the sonic image of Don't Stop Till You Get Enough. At first when I thought about it, oh boy, this is going to be very difficult to do because the glass bottles, and they were being played with metal strikers and wooden drumsticks and so on. It's going to have a tremendous transient peak, and it's going to make the recording very difficult to do. So I thought, aha, ribbon microphone. A ribbon microphone is not able to trace all of that transient response. Its response is perhaps more like that of the human ear. So I used my RCA ribbon mics on on the bottle percussion in Don't Stop Till You Get Enough, and the result is, well, you can listen to it. Anybody can listen to that and tell it makes an incredible sonic image. It's very clear, and it is very loud in the recording. You couldn't do that with a condenser mic. The glass bottle percussion that's in that recording was all recorded with these microphones. I had 2 RCA 44s and 2 RCA 77s. I'll show you a 77. This is an RCA 77 DX. This is a vintage ribbon microphone, and very much the same as this one, but a little bit different. Less proximity effect, but very wonderful to use with percussion instruments. One problem with the vintage ribbon mics, though, is that they're quite fragile. And by that, I mean they don't take any abuse at all. You don't want to go testing, because you can just about destroy a wonderful mic like this. There are a couple little tricks, though. If you see this mic from the side, okay, the ribbon is actually suspended in this plane here. And what I found out years ago is if you have the mic like this, in other words, in an absolutely vertical position, the high frequency response is pretty much up to spec. But if you want to add a little bit of high frequency boost, all you do is tilt the mic this way. And what happens is gravity puts a little bow in the ribbon, tightens it up, and adds about 3 dB at 10 kilohertz. I'm frequently asked about microphone placement when recording vocals. So I'd like to illustrate a little bit. And this is a small capsule condenser mic. It's an Audio-Technica, I don't know which model, but I love this mic. I use 2 of these frequently to record acoustical guitar. Fantastic microphone. But if I were to use this vocally to record a vocal, I would place it, if I want, let's say, a very breathy approach to the recording, and I want to eliminate the acoustical support of the environment, I would place it very, very close like this. And if you have a voice that, for instance, has a lot of plosive sounds, like P-pops or very sibilant, you may want to put a windscreen between. And if it was a large capsule condenser mic, in other words like this, I would have it positioned about like this. And in varying degrees, if you want to add acoustical support to the sound, you could have the mic as far back as this, let's say. And this position would add a lot of the early reflections that are occurring in this acoustical space to the sound. But if you want to eliminate the acoustical support, or let's say minimize the acoustical support, you can have it as close as this, and I frequently do that. I think we should talk a little bit about synthesizers and the important role that they play in the manipulation of sounds. To me, synthesizers are an incredible device that create the components of music. The problem with synthesizers, though, has always been, to me, the reality or the starkness of the direct sound is not very interesting. And so what I do frequently with synthesizers is I will send the sound out into the studio or a room. You don't really need a studio, but a big room, and then mic the room to get the early reflections and some acoustic support, true acoustic support to the sound, and then add back just a little bit of that microphone, the acoustic support, to the direct sound, and it tremendously expands the quality of the synthesizer. Okay, we're going to take the sound of the synthesizers for this recording. which is what I call virtual. In other words, it's the direct output. And I'm going to add the sound of this studio or this room to that. Now what I do is I take the sound and send it into the studio through these loudspeakers. And then with the XY microphone technique or coincident pair, I will add a portion of the sound of this room to the recording of the synthesizers. So if you notice here, I'm facing the microphones away from the sound. I'm not trying to record the sound of the speakers. I really don't want that. What I want is the early reflections of the sound in their natural acoustical order. So I will take this microphone. This is XY or coincident pair, and the object is to get the capsules at right angles, to each other, and as close to each other as is physically possible, like this. And then a small portion of this room sound in stereo is added to the mix of the synthesizers. Okay, first, here's the sound of just the synthesizer. In other words, the virtual, the direct output of the synthesizer. Now here's the sound of the synthesizer through the speakers in the room as heard by the microphones. This is early reflections only. And here's a combination of the two where we mix the sound of the microphones in with the virtual sound of the, or the direct sound of the synthesizers, and get a much wider, more interesting sonic picture of the synthesizers. Now what normally happens is I have a ratio of about 80% direct sound and 20% room mics. And what this does is it adds that ratio of early reflections to the sound of the synthesizer. I love to think out a sound field that I'm working on and to plan it and try to combine different techniques and make them fit together. And it's not as simple as you would think at first, because I always like to have a little bit of reality of sound in the sound field, so to speak, a bit of patch of blue sky somewhere in my sonic canvas. If it was a vocal background part, I would use a stereophonic mic technique, for instance, and combine that with single point sources, in other words, monophonic single microphone techniques, so that as a result the stereo pass will contain the early reflections in the sound field, and it will contain them in their natural relationship, in their natural order, which makes the overall sound of that part of the music very, very real, and it gives it a width and a dimension that using only mono point sources, monophonic point sources, it wouldn't be there otherwise. I do that with Michael Jackson's recording frequently when we're doing backgrounds, like a song like Rock With You, for instance. Many of the background harmonies in that are recorded in stereo, and it combined with the monophonic images makes a very rich and wide sound, and it's very interesting to the ear. I guess one of the best ways that I can illustrate how I use microphone technique as a tool is to give you a specific example of a recording that I have done that I'm sure a lot of you have heard. And that's recording of the Andre Crouch Choir on Michael Jackson's Man in the Mirror. And to me, this is a classic example of XY or coincident pair microphone technique. And what it is two microphones placed as close together as we possibly can, and the idea being that the arrival time of the sound hits both capsules at almost the same point in time. Now, when we talk about XY technique, frequently there's an assumption made that in XY that we would use a cardioid mic, but that's not really true, and I think that's an assumption that we shouldn't make. And what happens with using cardioid is that we end up with a highly directional microphone system. And also with cardioid, with the large capsule condenser mics, we have a great deal of proximity effect. So if your sound source is closer to one mic than the other, even though their mics are very, very close, you will have a distortion of the stereo panorama. But what I do is, that you may find interesting, is I use the mics in omni. And I kind of rely on something that I've known. There are almost no truly omni microphones available to us. There are a couple, but they're highly esoteric. And for instance, even if you take a mic that indicates that it's omni, it will still have enough of a polar pattern to it so that used in XY, that the microphones will present a really beautiful stereo spread. What we're going to do is to bring a choir into the studio here, and I'm going to demonstrate how this choir recording technique works with a pair of microphones in the middle of the studio, like this. The mics will be, the capsules will be pointing this way in bidirectional. You can actually do it in omni as well. Since there are no truly omni microphones, there will be considerable stereo effect. There will be more stereo with bidirectional. Then the choir is placed around the studio like this, and then at this width, if the walls of the studio were like this, if you move them in like this, you would get less early reflections and more presence on the sound. And if you mix the two, if you did one pass at the back position, like from here, and then doubled the choir, had them sing the exact parts again at this position, and mix the two, the result is incredible. Actually, we'll do the whole thing. We're setting up, we're going to record the choir with a XY stereo mic setup, or coincident pair, and this is the lower of the two, as I already said, and we'll tighten that up, and this should, the choir will be standing, so this mic will be set right here, and this mic will be move back here. And it is also to be set for bidirectional, which it now is. And the idea with this microphone technique is to have the capsules as close together as possible physically to minimize the phase differences of the arrival time of the sound. And the capsules are at right angles to each other, and as close to vertical as we can make them. And the upper one can be dropped just here, right there. As close as we can get them without touching. This is the setup for XY coincident pair. Both the capsules are set for bidirectional pattern, and the mics are as close together as we can possibly get them. What this does is the arrival time of the sound at both capsules is as close in time as possible. First, what we're going to do is record some oohs with the choir. And we'll record a stereo pass of them doing this on a pair of tracks on the multi-track. A circle around the mic. Okay. A little different, maybe. So Sherwood probably remembers me doing that before. Great, we'll go from the top. Earphones, everybody. The mics are live all the way around. So you come this way a little, please. Yeah, great. Okay, yeah, right there. Perfect. There's two ways to approach this. We can have them sing the harmonies at one time and adjust their distance from the microphones to make the harmony balance correct or musical. Or what I like to do is have the choir sing one note of the harmony and then record that on a pair of stereo tracks. And then record the next note and so on, so that I can adjust the harmony balance during the mix-down process. Okay, here's a take of one of the notes of the choir. Okay, let's listen and check some of these tracks without the cue mix to listen to the stereo image. Here's another take of another note, which is a harmony part with the choir. And here's another note of harmony, and then when we mix this song, I will be able to balance these parts in relationship to the melody. What we'll do now is to record background lyrics with the choir on another pair of tracks on the multi-track tape.
Candle to a flame, links that form a chain. I need you. Candle to a flame, links that form a chain. I need you.
Okay, here's what I'd like to do is we're going to record a monophonic solo or lead part to use against this gorgeous stereo spread with the choir created by the XY image. The mono part or solo part I will use as a point source, probably place it in the middle, which will create a wonderful contrast to the stereo spread of the choir parts.
I need you, yes I do. You're like a candle, yeah, to a flame. You're like the links that form the chain. Well, I need you, I need you.
Listen to how the mono point source tracks sound against the stereo images.
Links that form a
I
chain.
need you, yes I do.
I need you.
You're like a candle, yeah,
Candle to
a flame.
links that form a
You're
chain.
like the links that form the chain.
I need you.
Well, I need you, I need you.
When recording electric guitar, experiment a little bit with microphone placement. You can get some very interesting results this way, whether you're recording in stereo or mono. Here we're using a pair of Audio-Technica 4051s in a kind of modified A-B setup. With this microphone setup, there will be quite a bit of left-right intensity.
Candle to a flame.
initially, everything that I record in my projects, I record on analog tape first. I love the sound of analog tape recording. It has a beauty and a quality to it that I don't hear in digital recording. And once you have that quality in the music and have it recorded that way, then I will take this, here's two 24-track tape machines, I will take these tapes and transfer them to digital. And once you have the quality and the sound of the analog recording in the music, it stays, most of it stays there in digital. And what digital does well, digital recording, it does dramatically well. It's very robust, it stays, and you can play the tape next year, it will sound the same as it did now. That is not true with analog. Analog is more fragile, it is not as robust as digital. If you take a video camera and a motion picture camera, let's say, and you take a 35 millimeter beautiful high quality motion picture camera, and right next to it you set up a video, very high quality video camera, and you photograph the same image, and you look at the result of these two recording devices. The motion picture film will be beautiful and have a quality to it that is very pleasing. The video image will have all the same color temperatures and the same basic quality, but it will have a harshness to it that is not as pleasant as the motion picture film. This is exactly the way it hits me, the difference between analog and digital recording. Analog recording, to me, has a beauty and a quality to it that is not present in digital recording. This would be a great time to discuss one of the techniques that I use a lot. I call it multi-track multiplexing, and it was during the recording of the score for the motion picture The Wiz that I came up with the basic idea for this system, and I still use it today. It's a basic system of organizing multi-track tapes and then using those with pre-mixing of individual tapes to obtain many, many more stereophonic and even monophonic images in a recording. So I think we have a tendency to think if we have a 16-track recording machine is that that's all the tracks that we can use, and such is definitely not the case. I can actually have any number of these 8-track recording tapes and use them in a modular way. There are several reasons why this system works the way it does. First of all, let's say I want to record the background vocals on a 4-part harmony thing with 4 singers or some such thing. What I'll do is to take the 4 singers, do a stereo recording, overdub them, and maybe perhaps I'll want to do each set of tracks to be a different note in the 4-part harmony, so that I can then balance the harmony and make that balance the exact way that I want it to sound. So what I can do is to do that, and let's say I record all 4 parts, stereo passes on one tape. I will then take these 8 tracks, mix that down to 2 tracks of this tape. And then it leaves me 6 more tracks, or let's say those 6 tracks are rhythm instruments. So I've still only used 8 tracks of this tape, but this tape has all the original elements. So if I don't like this balance, if it doesn't work well for me with the basic rhythm instruments, I can then do this over again, make this balance any number of times that I want to achieve the desired emotional effect. The key to this system is don't ever erase a track. I never erase tracks. There is no way that you can prejudge the emotional value of a balance until you have heard all of the elements of the music. In other words, we can't have recorded the piano, bass, and drums of an orchestra and then do the vocal backgrounds and expect to make a judgment, a correct balanced judgment of the background vocal balance. You have to make that judgment after you hear all the elements in place. So if the vocal backgrounds are on this tape, I don't erase any of those. I can make a pre-mix on this tape on 2 tracks and everything to work with, but when I'm all done, all the elements are in place, I can then go back and change that pre-mix and until it works with the proper emotional value in the music. As far as putting depth in a recording goes, I think probably one thing that helps there more than anything is the use of stereophonic microphone technique wherever possible. In other words, if you're recording acoustic guitar, don't just stick a microphone in front of it and make a mono image of that. Put 2 microphones, coincident pair, and really work on the sound. This is what makes left, right, and deep and depth in a music recording. Recording a choir, recording a piano, any instrument, please don't be satisfied with a monophonic image. Work towards achieving true stereo perspective in a recording. There are instances in music recording where I will go for a monophonic recording for one very good reason. Let's take lead vocal, for instance. The reason I would not use a stereo microphone technique there is that I want a point source image with no wandering. Wandering meaning that if it was a stereo mic, a little bit of movement left or right would be perceived by the microphones and would be very confusing to the ear. Another thing I'd really like to get across to everyone is try to think of your recording as a piece of sonic reality. And that does not necessarily mean that this sonic reality could occur in natural acoustics. And I think probably the most important thing there is that our ear training should come from hearing live music in a good acoustical situation. Learn what an orchestra truly sounds like. All music is conceived to be heard with acoustical support. Now that doesn't necessarily mean reverberation or echo. What it means is acoustical support, whether it be a small space and a large space, or the combination of those 2 spaces in one recording to create an emotional effect. I kind of think of my work as making sonic sculptures. In other words, pieces of music reality that couldn't necessarily occur in a natural acoustic environment, but yet they have to make sense musically. The emotional impact of the music has to be there. We must make the music sound elegant and tasteful and appealing. But more important perhaps than those points, we have to make our music sound so good that people want to hear it over and over again. If nothing else comes across in this tape to you, the final user, I would like to impart one piece of advice, and that is to try to make our recordings sound more than merely multi-channel mono. In other words, try to think of stereo during the recording process, during the concept of the music that we're working on. To me, I think that one facet of my technique probably has affected my sound more than any other, and that is the fact that I use many, many true stereophonic images in the creation of the recordings that I've done. And by that, I mean true stereo with 2 microphones and trying to capture the reality of a stereo sound field and using that as part of my sonic landscape. So what I have said, I guess, is that try not to think in merely monophonic images. And I think you'll be amazed at how this can change your whole approach to the recording of music.